Hey, what's up? Thanks for checking out this video today. So today we've got a pretty sweet car in here. We got a 2015 Dodge Challenger Scat Pack. It's got a built motor with a Whipple. This is actually the supercharger sitting right here, valve covers. I've already got the gaskets and everything for it. Actually it's already tore apart. So we had a little issue with the valve train on this one. That's why it came in. And then at the end of that video, I'm going to talk about this one here, a little short clip of this Mustang and why it's in here. We're going to have another video of this one. So definitely check that one out when it comes out. With that said, let's go ahead and jump into the video. So I am back at the shop today. I am working on a Challenger Scat Pack, as you can see behind me. This one has a built motor by Bischoff Racing Engines, and it also has a Whipple supercharger on it, as you can see right here. Well, it was on it, it's now off. So the reason this thing is in here is this thing has always ran good. Like this motor, probably, we don't know how many miles are on the motor since they built it, 20,000, 30. It's been a few years. The original owner traded the car in or whatever, and so the new owner bought this car out of Columbus, Ohio, at a car dealership, probably about midsummer, last summer, maybe towards the end of last summer. And it had an issue with the clutch. It did have an aftermarket clutch in it, but there was just an issue with it. So we ended up putting a new clutch in it, flywheel, went back with a dual disc. Thing works great. It ran fine. Thing made a lot of power. And then towards the end of the summer, probably in the fall, he was out driving it and it started making a pretty awful racket. I mean, it was loud up underneath the driver's side valve cover. So once we was able to get him in here, I had to schedule him in, and I pulled the valve cover off, and let me show you what we found. So this thing has, these are stock rocker shafts on this thing. It does have some aftermarket stabilizers. They call these stabilizers, and then they call these collars. It's just a kit that ties the intake and exhaust shafts together, makes them stronger, and then these collars set up the adjustment side to side movement of the rocker arms. So what we found was, as you can see, this very back one on the driver's side was broken, and then also on the exhaust side, this ARP bolt was lifted up just about that far, and this one was too. Just these two were lifted up. So when I first seen it, I'm like, oh, okay, the bolt's backed out. Well, it wasn't that. They pulled the threads. Here's the aluminum that's out of the head. This one pulled the threads, and this one also pulled the threads. So it was actually this one right here and that one back there that pulled the threads. So this thing also has, you know, aftermarket springs. It's got a cam in it, the whole deal. So you can imagine what it did to this shaft. If you look at this shaft, I don't know if you can see that, but it is bent. It goes down and then it starts going back up. So, I mean, it's bent like really bad. Let me get this thing turned around over this way. These collars are kind of keeping it, but you can see it's bent bad. Okay, so that is definitely what happened there. So we're going to have to fix the head. We originally was just going to go with a new one here, but then I got to checking, and this is the intake shaft, which did not get lifted. These threads were in there, right? But this one is also bent a little bit. Not nearly as bad as this one, but it is bent a little bit. I've already checked it, and it is definitely bent. And that really makes no sense why that would be bent too. Unless something happened to this before the owner bought it, the new owner bought it. We're not really sure. So also, this push rod here, the exhaust push rods are longer than the intakes, right? So the exhaust push rod that was on this rocker is bent. It's not bent very much, but it's bent a little bit. When you roll it, you could tell it's got a high spot and a low spot. It doesn't roll freely. See how it kind of wants to go back and forth? And then you roll the other ones and they'll just roll forever. So we'll get to replace that one. These are basically a chrome moly, 80 thousandths wall thickness, 8.100 inches. So these, you got to have the right length push rods for these motors because they're non-adjustable. So you got to make sure that they're not too long, not too short. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at on that deal. So what we're going to do is we're going to get new rocker shafts, but they're going to be aftermarket. They're going to be a chrome moly rocker shaft, which would be super strong. We're going to go get a complete new set of these stabilizers and collars. We're not going to reuse these. We're just going to get new ones. And we are removing the cylinder heads. The main reason why is because we need to take a look at the lifter, at least the exhaust lifter on this cylinder and this cylinder, because they had all that play in them, to see if they've got damaged. Most likely we will have to change them. And then also I'm going to take a look at the cam to make sure it didn't damage the lobe on the cam. So you know, he really drives this thing normal. I mean, he don't beat on it, but you know, from time to time he has a little fun with it. But that shouldn't happen, right? Like I say, this motor's got a lot of miles on it. 20,000, 15, 20, who knows what it is. And as far as we know, it's never had an issue, but maybe it has. So all these bolts, these AOP bolts, I called this company that makes these, and they said that these should be torqued down to 30 foot-pounds. Now a stock bolt is 26 foot-pounds. So 30 foot-pounds is all you want to take these to. And I can tell you, when I went to take these off, they were a lot more than 30 foot-pounds. I mean to tell you, I mean, of course, it's always going to take more pressure to break a bolt loose than once you torque it. But I can tell you, it took me probably 60 to 70 foot-pounds to pop that bolt loose, to pop them loose. I thought they had Loctite on them. They didn't have no Loctite on them. So it's possible that if somebody went in here after the fact and did some stuff to it, maybe they over tightened them and it pulled the threads on that. We're not really sure what happened. So I did find, you know, I did find some other stuff. I mean, there was a couple missing bolts here and there. There was some loose bolts on stuff. So for instance, let me show you. So here's the Whipple supercharger. The very bottom, they call this the bottom intake. This is the one that bolts to the cylinder heads. And then this one is the intercooler. This would be the upper intake, they call it, with the intercooler. And then of course you have the head unit, the supercharger. So you have to pull these apart, you know, in stages. You got to take this one off, then you got to take this one off of the lower, and then you can take the lower off. So what I found was, it's kind of hard to see, but all these outer bolt holes that bolt to that lower intake, these three were different bolts. They were a 10 millimeter head instead of an Allen head, and they were longer. So they Now, let me say, Bischoff, when they built this motor, they didn't put the supercharger on. They just built a long block. And then the original owner had somebody put the motor in and put the supercharger on and all that. So anyway, all these holes all the way around is what that intercooler or upper intake bolts to. Well, these three are stripped out, and they ran longer bolts in to grab the threads, which there's not a lot of thread there. And then these two here, they wasn't even in them. They didn't even have these bolts in these. And those bolts go down through these this hole right here. There's two holes, and they actually sit down inside. They didn't even have them in there. So I'm kind of wondering, you know, was that something whoever was putting this thing together or what? They're just over tightening. Now all of these bolts here are supposed to be 9 foot-pounds. You got to make sure the threads are clean, and you got to put blue Loctite on them. Well, they had no Loctite on these at all. And I can tell you, when I went to loosen these up, every one of them were more than 9 foot-pounds. I can tell you that. So, you know, when you're dealing with small bolts going into aluminum, you got to make sure the threads are clean. You got to put Loctite on them. You don't want to put anything strong. The directions, you know, you look in the directions and it tells you 9 foot-pounds is all these do. And you got to, you know, put blue Loctite on them. Simple as that. So anyway, we're going to get it fixed up. I guess I haven't really decided what I want to do on this yet. You know, this really needs to be, these need to be repaired, but man, there's just not a lot of room here. I gotta, if I was to repair this, I gotta drill it and put a helicoil in there. So I gotta get an actual helicoil for this size, and I have to see how much room I have here. As of now, there is enough thread on the bottom of these three with those longer bolts for me to torque it to 9 foot-pounds. So if I can't get a helicoil in here because there's not enough room, the only other option would be to have this welded back solid re-drilled and tapped to the original size if I can't do a helicoil, or we may just go back the way it was and grab the threads on the second half. I mean, they're not stripped all the way down there. This one's not really even stripped at all, just a couple. This one was stripped about halfway down. This one's stripped about halfway. So those bolts that they had in there were definitely tight. So we'll figure that out when we get to it. So that's where we're at. I'm gonna go ahead and get the heads off of this thing. All I gotta do is get the valve cover off of the passenger side, and I gotta lift the car up. I gotta get the headers off, and then, you know, get the heads off. This thing's actually got ARP studs on the heads, so I'm gonna end up taking the nuts off, the ARP nuts off the studs, and then I have to unscrew the studs to get them out of the block, because this side maybe won't be a problem, but that side, there's no way them heads are coming off sliding up them studs. There's just not enough room. They'll hit the strut towers. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started on that, and you know, once we get them off, we'll get back to it. Okay, so I've got the heads off of this thing. Let me show you here. So I've already sent them out, took them to Bischoff Racing Engines. So they're really experienced with these motors. They do a lot of head work on these. They have a program for NHRA stock and super stock class, you know, on these. So with the CNC port job that they're going to do on this, it's going to wake it up definitely in the mid-range to upper RPM, which is where this really needs it. You know, this thing makes like all kinds of torque down low, good mid-range, but it kind of suffers up in the upper RPM. I'm not really sure if it's the cam that's in it, but that's definitely going to help in the upper RPM. So let me swing this camera around here and just kind of show you what it looks like with the heads off. So this side wasn't bad at all, getting the header out. This side was a little bit different story. You know, it was a little bit tighter over here, We had to get the screwed in studs. It's got ARP screwed in studs, like I was saying before. Once we got them out, I was able to get the head off. But before that, I had to get the header out of the way. I was able to pull them out through the bottom. So, and here are the headers laying over here. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So I wanted to go ahead and just kind of finish this video up. And oh, I got some information that could be the reason why we had this failure. So the owner, the old owner of this car, was having issues with the valve train. He had so many issues with this. That's one reason he sold the car. So what I found out was he had an issue with bent push rods. For whatever reason, push rods, I don't know how many of them, but he had some bent push rods. So the story is he works at a dealership here locally. He's in financing, and it's not a Dodge dealership. I'm not sure which brand it is. There's a mechanic there that has been working on this car whenever it has issues. So, I mean, maybe not. That's the reason. Can't really say for sure. You don't like to blame anybody. But these motors, you know, there's certain steps you have to take to do things right on this. Okay, so first of all, you got to make sure the push rods are the right length. Very important. I know this motor before this failure, they wouldn't no valve train noise at all. So I know they wasn't too short, but were they too long? You know, you could have too much preload on these. It's very important to have the perfect amount of preload on the lifters, on the roller lifters, because these are non-adjustable. So it's possible that these push rods are too long. I'm not sure. Once I get the heads on, torque down, I'm going to check the preload and make sure that these push rods are the right length. If they're not, we're putting new push rods on it. So, but we are going to, you know, fix the problem where this shaft, it's possible that the reason them threads got pulled is when they had that failure before with the bent push rods, it may have bent this shaft, and then they just put it back together with new push rods or whatever, and you can't reuse these when they're bent. So that could have been the case. We're not sure. But anyway, like I said, we got to get new shafts. I already got them coming. Chrome Moly. Got to get a whole new kit, and you know, of the stabilizers and the collars, and then I will check preload on the push rods. And we just want to make sure it's right and we don't have any issues. And I thought about maybe even changing out the lifters. I did check the lifters. They look fine. The cam looks fine. But, you know, is there something going on with the lifter? Is it not, is it sticking inside? So we may, matter of fact, I talked to Bischoff when I went and dropped the heads off. I talked to him about this. He pulled his old, he pulled the records from this when they built the motor. And he said that back then, depending on the cam, they would sometimes put, camera's crooked here. He said sometimes they would put short travel lifters in there. And I think he says Rhodes short travel lifters. I'm not sure. But anyway, short travel lifters are very sensitive to push rod length. When you use a short travel lifter, they're really designed for high RPM, which really this motor doesn't twist a lot of RPM. So you don't really need short travels. So a short travel lifter, you're supposed to have 0 preload. This is the push rod preload. 0 preload to a quarter turn. That's it. You can't have any more than a quarter turn. So, and what I mean by a quarter turn is if you was adjustable, you know, quarter turn, tightening in the preload. Now on a quarter turn of preload, you're probably only looking at about maybe 15 thousandths, maybe 20 thousandths of preload. That's it. 0 to about 20 thousandths. So I want to I'm almost thinking we ought to just change the lifters in this and just go with a good set of lifters. I don't know, we still got to kind of dig into that a little bit. Or I could just put some different push rods in here once I check the preload to make sure we're not going over that 20 thousandths of preload. If we can stay between 0 to 20 thousandths of preload, we should be fine. That could be another reason why maybe he had bent push rods in the past. It's very possible. So yeah, so that's the deal on that. So anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and cut this video off, but before I do, I'm gonna show you a little sneak peek of the other project that I brought in here. I'm gonna do a video on this one, and this one will be coming out soon. So what we got here, I don't want to drag this out and go too far on this deal, but this is a 94 Mustang. Customer bought this down in Florida. He's had it for a while, and he was just able to finally get around to trying to get this thing right. The car itself is in great shape. Somebody was just trying to turn it into a race car, it seems like. It was an absolute mess, and he bought it, kind of knew it was a mess. It didn't really run right. It kind of ran, but then it wouldn't start when it got hot, and it just had all kinds of issues. We're not sure what's, supposedly it's got a built motor. We're not really sure. I mean, it does have can-filled heads. It's got some big, racing headers. It had a GT40 or a Cobra intake. It had a Pro Charger on it. But the wiring was an absolute nightmare on this car. It was a fire hazard. Battery in the back. They had welding cable running to the front instead of a good, quality battery relocation kit. It was just a nightmare. So I'm going to turn this camera around here and show you all the stuff that I've already taken off of it, and some of the stuff that's going back on it. So being that it was such a mess, we decided that it would be more affordable, would cost less money to convert this thing to a carburetor. Just bottom line, we're not going to put the Pro Charger back on it. Everything on this thing is super old. I'm talking old. So he's just got to try to recoup some money, sell the intake, the Pro Charger, whatever he can sell to recoup some of the money for the parts that we're putting on it now. Plus, it's going to look really nice when we get done. There was nothing that we could have done to make this thing look nice with the parts that were on it. But with the parts that's going on it, it's going to look good, and it's going to run good. So I want to turn this camera around here and kind of show you real quick here. It's got gauges, tack. The other seat I've got out, I had to take the seat out. It's got fuel rails, regulator, it had number 10 AN line coming to the front, 8 AN for a return. All that's coming off. I got a new regulator. I got everything going on it different. I've already taken all this off. It was a disaster in here. Like this whole deal here, they had it mounted over here because of the supercharger inlet. I went ahead and remounted it back over there. I kind of already cleaned it up, took a lot of the wiring off. So it's gonna look night and day different. Night and day different. So here's the mess of parts that came off of it. The fan on this thing, it's noisy. The motor on it is bad. It was drawing so many amps it was trying to melt the wires. So we got a new fan coming. So I've already kind of started. This was a nightmare back here. The wiring for the fuel pump was really surprised. This cap is cracked, so we got a new one. But anyway, let me show you some of the parts going on this bad boy. As you can see, this is going to be the carbureted stuff. Another MSD distributor. That's the MSD box that he actually had. It was in the glove box, so I took it out. I'm going to remount it somewhere. Got some nice Really nice. We got a new coil in there, spark plugs, nice looking valve covers. I got a battery relocation kit. There's the cap for the fuel cell. And then on the cooling side of it, because of the way the alternator bracket is on this thing, it has no AC, it has nothing else. So we had to go with a water pump, electric water pump. So I'm just waiting on the fan. It'll be here tomorrow. We're putting a new fan on it. And let's see, on this deal, everything's here. The only thing I'm waiting on is the intake. And it actually came in just a little bit ago. FedEx brought that. And it's not open yet. I didn't open it. But anyway, I'll show you that on the other video. We're using an Edelbrock Performer RPM air gap intake. So, oh, and spark plug wires. They're actually coming tomorrow too. Got some new Taylor spark plug wires. We're kind of going with that black theme, as you can see. It's gonna look really nice, man. I mean, it's gonna be a night and day difference on this deal. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut this video off. So definitely be on the lookout for that video on this car. That'll be the next one. And then you'll be able to see kind of what's going on that deal. So I do appreciate you guys checking this video out, and we'll have another video once we get the heads back on this Challenger. So you know, going back together with it. So be on the lookout for that one. That'll be a little bit down the road because it's going to be a while before we get the heads back. They're so busy. So yeah, appreciate you all checking this out. Please like, subscribe, and share. Hit that thumbs up button too. And we will catch you on the next video.